So what you're looking at right now is the ZV-1. I've been wanting an RX 100 for a long time. Never could bring myself to buy one just because a lot of the features and stuff I just felt weren't good enough. It felt like for people who are more into videography, they were just tossing us a bone a little bit here and there, but they weren't actually giving us what we really wanted. And they finally done it with the ZV-1. It's a same 1-inch sensor, actually the same lens from the Mark V, and with the guts of the Mark 7 in there, and adding some of the new tricks like active stabilization, interval shooting, things like that. On top of that, they made it kind of easy for a lot of us. So you see that background back there? All you gotta do is hit a button. Isn't that cool?
It is a variant on the RX 100 line, however, it's kind of like its own offshoot thing. Where the RX 100 is very much geared towards, like, I would say the general public that just wants a point and shoot camera to go out and shoot photography, and it can do some video stuff. This is much more a videographer's camera that can happen to do some photo stuff. So basically thumbnails when you're talking about YouTube. They kind of market it as a vlogger's camera, which I think is fair since it's a lot of vloggers that were really pushing for a lot of the ideas and features that ended up into this. But I really feel like this is a better camera for anybody that's trying to do good YouTube videos. It is expensive. It is 800 bucks. However, it's not as expensive as the RX 100, so there's that. That's typically around $1,200. But there's some things that they kind of cut corners on here and there. One of them being is that this is a polycarbonate body. So this is basically plastic, is a fancy way to say it, but it's a very ruggedized plastic. It holds up really well. I'm not typically very careful with my stuff, with my gear. And I've just been throwing this in my backpack and my bag and lugging it around and stuff. And it's got a couple scuffs and stuff on it, but other than that, it's held up fairly well. So it doesn't feel cheap in any kind of way compared to the RX 100 line, where when I've used RX 100s, the one thing I will say about the magnesium body on them is although they do hold up slightly better than this, you do notice like scuffs and scrapes and stuff on them since it is a metal body and it is painted. Usually when you throw it in a bag or something and it hits something the wrong way or something, you're gonna see that little silver scuff where here it's just like a very light scuff. You barely notice it.
However, as cool as this defocus background effect is, for exposure, it's usually better to have that off, and we have about the worst exposure situation right now. The sun is literally in my eyes. It's getting ready to set, and I'm going to do a quick spin around and we're going to see how the camera handles it. It's supposed to be metering for my face, not for everything else in the background like a lot of other cameras. So let's see how this does. I see it's still tracking my eye. There's the sun back there. That's like directly into the sun. That's pretty impressive. There's some really crazy highlights. Does it adjust? Oh, it does. That is nuts. I feel like I'm in the Sound of Music right now, the way I'm twirling around. Yeah, it even says backlight. That's kind of crazy. Okay, worst case scenario. That's nuts. It works out well. That's really crazy. And then over here, and is it gonna calm down? Not so much. It's not perfect. It's not perfect, but if you get the light just right, it does eventually calm down.
One thing I will say that I like very much about this compared to the RX 100 line is that the fact that this does have some newer style controls. So the record button is very large instead of this little tiny thing on here. And then the grip. So they added this grip, which a lot of people end up buying secondhand for the RX 100. And then it's just like a stick-on grip, but this is built into the body. So when you're holding it like this, it's very stable, or even better yet, when it's backwards, that little lip right there and that ledge here, you hold it so much better. And I feel like I've seen so many videos of people trying to vlog on their RX 100s and they just drop it because. So let's talk about some of the specs on this thing. It's using the same Exmar RS 20.1 megapixel 1-inch sensor in here, which means it's going to be a lot larger than what you can find on your cell phone, which is what I'm shooting on right now. And it's a Carl Zeiss lens, 24mm to 70mm with an f-stop of 1.8 at the wide. and 2.8 all the way extended out. So I do notice that the f2.8 comes really quick. So really, honestly, once you hit about 30 mil on this lens, you're at f2.8. So really, it's only at like 24s you're going to get the f1.8. But having that f1.8 is going to give you that nice, like, blurred background that everybody looks for in their videos. The other thing that this does that the RX100 line has not had for a little while is it does have a built-in ND filter. It's an ND9, which is going to give you about 3 stops of light difference. So there's a lot of people out there are going to say, now you're stuck with a point and shoot. Now you got this lens, you're going to live and die with that lens. There's nothing you can do about it. For 500 bucks, you could have gotten a Canon M50 with interchangeable lenses. Yes, and it has an APS-C sensor. Yes, but it's also doesn't have clean HDMI out. It's kind of a pain in the butt if you want to live stream with it. It's a lot larger. It's not as pocketable as this. It's not as that's a big thing for me right there. It's not as pocketable. Number 2, the kit lens it comes with is f3.5, and you're not going to get that nice depth of field effect with that kit lens. So you're going to have to spend if you want image stabilization along with the in-body stabilization of that thing to make it look as smooth as possibly can, you're going to end up spending about another 500 bucks for a good lens on it. You could probably get it secondhand for around 300. And then on top of that, once you get to that point, you're at the price of this anyways. So there's no such thing as the perfect camera, but there's a such thing as close to perfect for what I want. And that's what you have to think about. Do you want this big, huge camera with interchangeable lens? Do you want something collapsible and pocketable like this? Light, whatever, it's up to you. Okay, this carries over the same image processor from the RX 100 Mark 7, and you've got a lot of the same capabilities. You can actually like do high frame rate recording at 960 frames a second on this. However, the problem is they've cut down the buffer to about half. So say you're recording 480 frames per second. Your 480 frames that was 4 seconds on the Mark 7 is going to be like 2 seconds on this. So that's basically what the buffer is. It's the point where all the data gets shoved into something fast enough and then written to the card, because the SD card's just not fast enough in some cases to actually record everything. Having said that, for me, I'm not going to be using 960 and 480 frame slow-mo, maybe the 240 from time to time. It is cool, but this also will continuously record in 1080, 120 frames per second, and it can do it up 100 megabits per second. So I could just slow the video down in an editor and get a slow motion effect anyways, but let's go ahead and roll some footage of what the high frame rate recording looks like. It's still pretty cool to look at, but the 960 is just, the 480 is barely usable and the 960 is just, So compared to the Mark 7, what they did do is they got rid of the flash and they got rid of the viewfinder, which you can use for like sunny days. However, what they did add was the hot shoe back in that was in the Mark II that everybody liked, and then they just took out and never put it back in, right? So say you're outside and you're just in really, really dark conditions where this camera can't even pick up your face or anything like that. If you just want to light your face, you could put like a video light on there, just fine. You can get like a Rode Video Micro, stick it on there, or really any mic that can take a hot shoe mount.
So the ZV-1 also has a new type of microphone on board. There's a 3-capsule microphone array that actually is like more directional towards the front. Still stereo microphone, which is great. I like it. From what I heard so far, I actually like the sound coming out for a small camera. It sounds really good. And it has this little wind muff on the top, and it's pretty windy today, so let's take it off and then put it back on. So this is the ZV-1 right now with the wind muff off. Got it right here, and it just goes into the hot shoe. Nothing electronic, it's just a piece of plastic basically. And so now let's put that back on. Okay, good big strong wind coming in. What'd you think? Is there a big difference between the two? I hope so. I also went and tested out in one of the most extreme conditions. As windy as it is here, it's way windier down at the ocean. And I went down there today not only to do high frame rate recording, but also to test the audio. And just to warn you, at no point did I be stupid enough to take the muff off completely and kill your guys' ears. So the entire time the muff is on, you can just imagine how bad it would be with the muff off. This is about the most extreme wind I can find to test the wind muff on top of the ZV-1. It's an extremely windy day today. I'm gonna turn on wind cutoff and see if it helps any. That's with the wind cutoff on. It probably takes a lot of bass and stuff away from the internal microphone. But this is as good as it's gonna get. It is extremely windy here. This is like trying to test in a wind tunnel.
All right, so I went out and did some stabilization tests on a pretty incredibly rocky beach, and we'll go out there and check that in a second, but just want to say that the lens in it does have optical image stabilization. However, I would say it's only good enough to get rid of like the little slight shake when you're hand holding something and standing still. There is the active stabilization in here from the Mark 7, and it does crop the sensor a bit, and when you're shooting in 4K, you're already cropped. So a lot of people are complaining about it. I can see it if you're just holding this by itself, but if you're extending it out somehow with like a small, I really only need a small tripod because my arms are so long, but you can get something longer like a tripod or a selfie stick. All right, so like here's me recording, and typically we're like right about there when I've got like a normal tripod on this. This is where I see it, but if you really want to get extreme, you could get something like this. This is a selfie stick. You could extend it out quite a ways. So if you want to see the whole world, I guess you could do that. And if you trust your really expensive camera on a selfie stick.
All right, as you can see, the beach is actually pretty rocky here, so I think this is a pretty good spot to test out the stabilization. All right, so this is gonna be pretty rough. I'm literally walking on rocks right now. And this is what the ZV-1 and 4K looks like without stabilization on. It's almost fall over. Okay, and this is what they call standard, or just the optical on the lens. And the terrain's still pretty rough here. And in my opinion, it's good for hand-holding photography if you're not doing anything with a tripod or something like that. But other than that, I'd really suggest not trying to walk with this thing. Otherwise, if you're just holding the camera out, you can do it. But then when you go into active, which is the digital stabilization, which is better for movement like this, then it goes into a digital crop. And now this is active with a digital crop. And a little smoother, still walking on some pretty big ass rocks though. So this is about as bad as it gets. And this is what this is like with the active on. So this is digital stabilization. It's actually both optical and digital. It's supposed to smooth it out a little bit more. And now I'm just walking the way I normally would.
Okay, I would say like one of the things about this that has a big plus over the RX 100 line is typically in the RX 100, it'll overheat fairly easy. Like you'll only get about 5 minutes of 4K shooting at a time and it'll automatically stop you, but then the camera will also overheat. So they have a thing in here called auto power off temperature, and you can set it to high, and essentially you will still get temperature warnings. And when I get on I heat them and I like turn it off for a few minutes, and then typically when I turn it back on, it's good to go for like another 10-15 minutes. But it does give you unlimited recording, and there's people out there, I'm not willing to try it because I want to try to keep good care of my equipment. And it does warn you when you turn it on, it can be unsafe for your equipment, but you could record at 4K unlimited until the battery's exhausted and never have it shut off. But there is a 3.5mm TRS microphone jack input, so you can plug in your own mic. The elephant in the room is it is still using USB micro, so there's the connectors there. And it is USB 2.0, unfortunately. The micro doesn't transfer files over very fast, but the plus side is it will charge the battery inside the camera if you plug it in, which a lot of cameras won't allow you to do that. You have to buy a charger separate. Or you can actually transmit not only your data, but when Sony comes out with a future app that they're working on PC, you can transfer video like a webcam would through up from 1080 30 frames per second is the max for it because it is 2.0 to your computer. But this is going to look a hell lot nicer than like a C920 is, especially if you have a nice background to blur out and lights and stuff and all that in the background. This is going to do a way better job. And on top of that, you can actually continue to power the device off USB. It has an option in there called USB power supply. You just turn it on, and when it's connected through USB, it can just draw power from this instead of the battery. You do have to have the battery still in here though to operate it. And then there is they call that micro HDMI out, and it is a clean HDMI, so you can take the display off, all that stuff, and I believe it'll do up to 1080-60. But I did see options in there for 4K, so maybe it'll do 4K 32. I haven't tested it yet. I don't have a proper cable for it, so. But there is that option too if you want a little bit more than what you can get out of Sony software when it comes out. I have seen the Canon software, and they say it's also 30 frames, but it looks more like it's like around 24 to 15 in some cases to me. So that's all going to be dependent on the software. We're going to have to do a separate video when that stuff finally comes out. And if you own other cameras, other Sony cameras specifically, when you shoot for portrait for like Instagram, TikTok, something like that, you have to go in the editor and rotate the video so it's in the correct portrait aspect ratio, I guess. With this, not anymore. You just rotate the camera like this, and it's gonna auto-rotate that video the right way for you when you go to download it to your phone or whatever for TikTok and stuff. The cool thing about this is it does have Wi-Fi, and you can use the Image Edge app to send your videos and photos and all that over Wi-Fi. If you try to send like a 50, 60, 100 meg video from this to your cell phone, it's gonna be bog slow. However, they were smart and they have options for 1080, 30, and 60 at a lower bit rate. So instead of the normal like 50 megs a second, you can do 16 for 30, 1080, 30, and 24, I believe, 24, 26 for 60 frames a second. And it makes it a lot quicker to transfer to your phone and get it up to whatever service you want. The one thing I did notice though, for some odd reason, is when I would take videos for my Instagram stories on this and then try to upload them to my phone and then go into the Image Edge app and try to share it through that, or just through my phone or whatever, for whatever reason, the videos that this was shooting for Instagram were not, even though there was sound on my phone, the sound was not posting to Instagram. So I don't know why that is. It works on Twitter, all the other stuff I've tried. I've actually had Instagram stories that have just gone straight to Twitter, or that I shot for Instagram stories that have gone to Twitter because they just do not work transferring over. You'll just get video. Other than that, only other observations I would tell you is I've noticed that as much as I like this microphone, it's great for outdoors, but when you're indoors and you're shooting and you have a room that's not particularly like sound padded or anything like I'm shooting in right now, I'm sure you guys are picking up some reverb in here. This is really gonna pick up some reverb. This is This feels like this is mostly meant for outdoors, or if you just don't have anything else better for indoors, you could use this if you need to. In some apps, you can actually reduce it, but I would recommend at least an extra microphone, probably like something like a lavalier. You can get like is it Mobi or whatever. I'm going to do a video on it in the future. I have one that works with this and cell phones, and it works great. There's like Rode mics, there's Rode wireless mics and all that stuff. And these are all great options for when you're indoors and you want to like reduce that echo or whatever.
And it is dark out here. I can't see the lens, I can see the red light. These mosquitoes are flying all around because they're detecting the heat from the camera. But this ain't bad. This ain't bad, it's still tracking my eye. So when it gets a little bit darker, you do have to go out of auto mode and do some manual work yourself to get it to work. But the fact that the ISO is only at 3200, this thing goes up to 12,800. It gets noisy at that, but it goes up to that. And I'm still on an aperture of f1.8 with my shutter speed at 160, obeying the 180 rule. And look how exposed I am now. And it's really not that bright out here. I mean, there's lights on back there to prove it. We're back in auto mode now, but that back there, that's what I was filming in. That dark area back there. That's insane. That's a damn good camera. I'm very happy with my investment. This is one of the main things I was looking for, because I go to events like PAX and some LAN events and stuff, and it gets dark in those rooms, and it's hard to pick up light. And the fact that it did that good and that back there.
Alright, so I hope that got you guys some information about the ZV-1. I'm sure I left something out. I always do when I do these videos, and I go back and I'm like, damn it, I forgot something. So if you have any questions, you can ask me in the comments down below, or come join my live stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/cell processing, links down below, or join the Discord and I'll try to answer your question in there too. Yeah, this thing so far, my overall takeaway with it has been, after shooting YouTube videos on a cell phone like this for years, because obviously I'm shooting on a cell phone right now, how would you see me? But after shooting videos on a cell phone for years, I've always had like little struggles and things here and there, and obviously the screen can't flip out on this to get to the nicer camera on the rear of the device or whatever. And this is just, this not only blows any of the cameras on this away, but it makes shooting so much easier. I don't struggle with it. Often when I'm shooting from a cell phone, I just feel like I'm struggling, and some people just don't want to mess with this or spend the amount of money on this, and I get that, but God, it's been so much easier to create with this thing, and I love it.